Gabby Staten Island on the Craft Growers Network, and we are live with Brandon Hudson, aka Tattoo Sadhu. And he's a good friend of mine, and he's becoming a closer friend every day. I'm feeling very blessed to have him here today because not only is he a cool guy, but he is an agronomist. So he's got some real science to share with us. We're not going to be talking bro science today. We're going to be talking real science. The topic of discussion today is going to be organic gardening for inorganic versus inorganic, and is organic gardening always the right move?
Awesome.
Because, okay, hold on one second. Just want to see if I can get the chat going. Public chat. Are you able to see that? On the right
I
hand
don't
side of your
see.
screen, there should be an option for chat.
See. Oh, there it is. There we go. Chat.
Cool. And
Awesome. Okay.
do me a favor, start off by putting your Instagram handle and your website there because we can put that on YouTube. We can't have that
Okay.
on Reddit, but this isn't on Reddit just yet. So want to make sure everyone knows Tattoo Sadhu. That's who he is on Instagram.
Yeah, that's one of my many nicknames. I think, I'm jumping way in front of things, but back in the cannabis culture days, my name's Brandon Hudson, and I went by Brendan Houston for decades. That was the address and name I got my seeds sent to, and it was close enough to my name that even when it went to the wrong place, the seeds always made it into my hands. So
Nice.
yeah.
Do you have a website you want to share as well?
No, nope, that's it.
Okay. Well, everybody, today we're going to do something that I think is unique, at least for us. And so we are live on YouTube, but we are making this video for Reddit. And so what we're going to do is we are going to record content following the rules for Reddit. So what this means is we are not going to be talking about our companies. We're not going to be talking about stuff that we're selling. We're going to be talking about growing. We're going to be sharing knowledge. And we're going to be discussing some of the questions and posts that come up on Reddit. And so I hope you guys all enjoy. And away we go. So, greetings, everyone. This is Gabby Staten Island and Brandon Hudson. We wanted to make this video, and we're going to make a bunch of videos that we're going to do for Reddit. And the first thing I want to do is I want to thank, and I don't even know who I'm thanking because I got an invitation to join a group on Reddit. It's called Cannabis Cultivation. And I made a couple of posts, and the response I got was just unbelievable. And this was without even like putting much effort into the content, posted a couple of pictures, and some of them were of tissue culture, which was pretty eye dazzling stuff to see. But I have one video that in less than a week has over 70,000 views. And when that happened, I said, man, I need to make some content and direct it towards this group on Instagram. So I'm really grateful. Um, I mean, as we all know, Instagram, they are so strict,
They hate
like
us.
they hate us. And, I've said this before, it's kind of, and I got this from, man, I'm forgetting his first name, the guy from Gene Traders. Um, but what he said was, it's like Stockholm syndrome, that we're supporting our abusers essentially. Like
Mhm.
we're in love with the guys that hate us and try to
Right,
oppress us. And
right.
so I'm trying
We
to stop doing
we
that.
desperately want them. We're still courting them. We want them to like us so badly, and they're not gonna.
Yeah, and you know what I realized, when they threw me off of most of my channels, um, there's other there's other opportunities. and this Reddit thing kind of fell onto my lap. My name on Reddit is Gabby Staten Island. Let me see if I can pull it up just to be sure, because I don't often. Yeah, so it's just Gabby Staten Island is my Reddit. And the group that I've been really involved in is cannabis cultivation. There's some other ones. Mr. Wolf has macro grow. So there's a bunch of good stuff. Send me some DMs. Oh yeah, it's Lou from Gene Traders and Louis Farmstrong. Love that guy. Um, but anyway, so the name of the group that I've been really working with is Cannabis Cultivation. And like I said, Mr. Wolf has Macro Grow, and there's a bunch of groups there. Now they have rules. You're not allowed to talk about sales. You're not allowed to promote your company, and that's fine. Like today, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna share a whole bunch of information. That's what I want to do. Is I want to share knowledge, and today, I said this. I did a quick live on Instagram to get people to come over here. Today we have Brandon, aka Tatu Sadhu, and he's an agronomist. So today we're going to be talking like real science, not bro science, and you know, I don't totally discredit bro science because a lot of it is observational, but following a little more of the scientific method and having a little more proof to what you're saying, it matters. And so, first question I have for Brandon is, what does it take to become an agronomist? How many years of
Okay.
studying, and how does one become an agronomist?
If I back up for 2 seconds, just because I'm a huge fan of your podcast, and I really enjoyed the ones with Michael Siegel, Wolf Siegel, the farmer in the sky, as most folks know him. And at one point, he said something about he kind of gets mad when people are putting down bro science, and I'm kind of infamous for crapping on bro science. Um, when the company I work for or I'm talking about bro science, we're not talking about observational experiential science, the folks that got us here. We're talking about things that are counterproductive for growers. The folks that and Wolf's different because he's a scientist. Whether he wants to take that title or not, he's a scientist. The way he works and the way he, you know. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
You can be I put myself on mute because I was making a little noise and then I forgot to unmute myself. You can be a scientist without credentials.
Yeah,
Okay, you just have to follow the scientific method,
yeah.
and it needs to be something that you're actually researching and studying. And Wolf is actually a scientist because he's done more real studies on lighting than just about anyone I know. I mean, I know Bruce Bugsby is considered a an authority, but I'm not sure that he's actually done more research and science on lighting with the plants
I don't
than Wolf.
I don't think anybody has done more lighting work with cannabis than Wolf. Just hands down. I just don't think anybody has. And if they have, they're only doing it because of the work that Wolf did back in the day. So either way, I feel like he should get those accolades.
And he's
And
entertaining as hell, right? I
yeah,
mean, the
oh
guy's
yeah,
got stories. He tells a story about how he smoked cannabis in the womb with
with
Jack
Kerouac.
Kerouac. So it's just like those type of stories are just priceless.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But so I just wanted to make that statement because he's somebody I really respect and, somebody I used to read his articles and, and hang on every word. And so um when I'm talking, if I'm speaking in a derogatory fashion about something perched water tables, layering, white ash, like some things that, I'll take all fades on those things. I love those conversations. And I've done the research, so I feel pretty confident about the conversations. But I love to talk to people and I love to be wrong. Like I'm really fortunate to work for a guy that allows me to be wrong because that's how you learn, and so he wants me to do trials. He wants me to do things. And so I'm in a really great situation and kind of and that's the homie Nubs,
I want to say,
Sincerio. I
please,
see a
I'm
lot of,
old, but I only have 35 years of cultivation experience. Don't age me any more than I am.
right, right. Well, I've got 40 and I'm old.
You're an
I'm pushing
OG.
6. Well, see, and I love that because, like, like I'm definitely not an OG. My dad grew, and he's Wolf's age. He just passed, but he's Wolf's age, and so like those really are the OGs. But I've got a book that has photos of a outdoor bust inside of like the courtyard of an apartment complex in New York City from 1939. So like, you know, there's OGs and OGs and OGs, I feel like we're just, people like you and me, we're super lucky. One, we got to catch the last of, for me, the greatest show on earth. The greatest, coolest thing that you could ever go do is go jump on Dead Tour. And we got to see that. And we got to land on the shoulders of guys like Wolf and all the unknown growers like my dad and my uncle and all these people that were guerrilla growers in the 60s. And they moved the plant forward really fast. And so I'm really grateful for all those people. And I'm going to tell on myself here, back to the question, I do not have any horticultural degrees at all. And I come from a family that does. My mom's a retired botanist. My aunt, her sister, is a retired horticulturalist, used to run Evergreen, which is the Carter family fold, Johnny Cash's wife's family, nursery and everything in Virginia. And so I grew up, in big farms and stuff in East Tennessee. And so I've been around plants my whole life, but I didn't pursue that in school. And so, as far as me accumulating the math, the chemistry, the biology, the what you need to be an agronomist, I think, is metrics, And so I've just put in the hours. I've done the reading, I've done the studying, I've done the experiments, I've done the trials. Um, and so I'm just somebody that, my dad's doctorate was in education. My brother was a school teacher. I come from a family that highly prized education. That was the way out of poverty, And so, you know, uh, mama taught me how to read. Papa taught me how to read. If I don't read, my soul gets lost. It ain't nobody's fault but mine. And so I took that to heart. And so I've just done the studying, and I love weed. I love cannabis. I've been smoking cannabis since I was a very young kid. I'm not endorsing you go smoke your 4-year-olds out. I'm not saying that at all, but that's the environment
Or
I
like
grew up.
Wolf did, you're not suggesting that mothers smoke cannabis with children in the womb.
Right, right. I'm not,
Even if they're with Jack Kerouac,
even
maybe
if
they
it's
shouldn't.
Kerouac. Yeah, even if it's Kerouac. But I distinctly remember my very first conscious time smoking cannabis. My parents would, smoke us out in the car to put us to sleep to get us on a 6-hour road trip someplace, or but I can distinctly remember being 4 years old. It's before my sister was born, sitting in the Smoky Mountains in East Tennessee, one of the prettiest places on the planet. My dad's on one side of me, and his best friend Bill Woodard was on the other side, and they were passing a joint back and forth, and it was good weed. And so eventually they started getting really high, and they started handing it to the 4-year-old to pass back and forth. And I just, I'd had people blow smoke in my face. I'd been in rooms where I'd gotten clam baked and all that kind of stuff. But I just decided I was going to take a drag off of this. I just thought it was a cigarette. And I immediately was just overwhelmed with whatever this is. It's the most amazing thing that anybody's ever experienced. Everything. I was sitting in a field in just one of the most beautiful places on the planet, watching a herd of like 40 deer just chilling in this valley. And then everything just kind of got this nice, soft. I remember everything kind of being purple and lavender and having this kind of euphoric, just kind of giddiness about me. And I'd love to know what that strain was. I have no idea what that cultivar was.
How old were
But I
you?
was 4, and I just fell in love, just like in love. It was the most amazing thing. And so I'm definitely not. I think my parents made some some weird decisions, but I made it. And I can still do math and chemistry and all that kind of stuff. And I was a Big Ten soccer player, and so I think we've proven that cannabis is like there was an ink master one time where they threw a guy off for smoking, and I loved it because they said it was performance enhancing. They didn't say it was hurting him. They said it
Oh
was he
shit.
was cheating because it was because you do better work on weed. I used to tattoo cops that would in a prohibition state, they would be like, hey, you don't smell loud, you want to go do your thing, because they wanted me to be relaxed and doing my best work. So like they know it's performance enhancing. So I love that. um but yeah, I do a lot of segues, so please bring me back on track when I
Bro,
get.
I mean, those are some great segues. And now, what we are going to do once we really start to get into it is we're going to try to put content in about 15-minute segments, right? So I'm going to look at the clock and I'm going to try to make some 15-minute segments because that's what's required by Reddit. They don't allow videos that are longer than 15 minutes. And to be honest with you, my best YouTube videos have gotten 10,000 views, and these videos on Reddit had 10,000 views like within a few hours.
Wow.
So I really think making some content for Reddit is what I want to do.
Okay.
But we got to follow the guidelines.
Yep.
We can't talk about our companies. We can't self promote. We can't um,
For sale.
and we can't exceed 15 minutes, right? So in a second, we're gonna get going. I just have a quick question that came to my mind. It's just like something really silly. And this is like one of those things like glad we don't, or not glad, but we don't actually have this choice. But if you had a choice to continue seeing Jerry or to
Mm.
continue smoking herb and you had to give up one, what would it be? And before you answer, I'll say mine. If I could continue to grow cannabis, but I couldn't smoke it, but I could continue to see Jerry for the rest of my life, I would choose that. Um, I've learned that I can, and first of all, I abuse cannabis. I know I do. Like,
I do.
you know, like
I smoke.
like I I don't treat it like the sacrament that it should be. And for that reason, part of it is like if it was taken away from me, like I almost might deserve it because like I said, I don't, and I'm being honest, I don't feel like I treat cannabis with the respect that I should. And I just abuse it. I smoke, it's just nonstop, you know? But the thing is like I grow other plants like San Pedro cactus, and
Hmm.
I feel like I can feel their energy and connect with these plants, even though I've never consumed them. They're powerful plants. And maybe, Jerry's been gone since 1995, right? So maybe 30 years later, if I didn't smoke cannabis for 30 years, I would change my
Right.
mind,
Right.
but it's just like
Right.
I miss Jerry so much, and his music healed my heart. It was medicine, every single time, like it music is a very strong medicine,
Big time.
and it's something, and there there is other good music. Like I'm wearing a Mike Love hat today, and I love him. I think his message is so positive, and I recommend that everybody go check him out.
He's great.
I just miss Jerry.
I
It's
miss
just like
Jerry to my
it's so
soul.
hard to not like miss Jerry the way I do. Mhm.
Jerry saved my life, man, 100%, and I've heard that from a bunch of people, man. I won't get into it, but I grew up in an incredibly dysfunctional, violent, um, abusive childhood, and I really didn't know what happy was. And the first time I heard Dark Star, it hit me in my soul. It hit me in my DNA. It changed me. It's making my hair stand up. It made me
The first
giddy.
time you heard it live or recorded?
Recorded. Just on Live Dead. I got a hold of Live Dead and changed my life. And I was like, I gotta go find these guys. I gotta go see these guys. I gotta go see these guys every chance I get. And then when I went, it was a million times better than I could have possibly imagined. It was the most welcoming, um, friendly, and genuinely friendly. Nobody was burning me. It was just, and I'm sure it helped that I went with like this super heady, really pretty deadhead girl to my first show. And so, she knew a lot of people. She was really plugged in. So, like cool bros are coming and trying to talk to her all day. And they're like, hey, this is your friend. Here's a big chunk of heady hash, bro. Go someplace else. I want to talk to your friend. But so like people were like kicking me down all kinds of stuff and just showing me love and making sure I was having a good time. Oh, this is your first show, and like just let's go up here, man. Let me show you some tricks. And it was just I'll never forget there was a guy laying against a tree and he had just had too much too fast and he was taking himself a little mid-show siesta and his wallet had fallen out of his pocket and not being real familiar with the Dead scene, and I would say this would maybe have a different outcome these days at Dead and Co, but I'm watching this guy because his wallet's laying on the ground and I'm like, oh, somebody's gonna take that. And because all my concerts until then had been rock and roll concerts where somebody would probably take your wallet. And I see this dude, this brother walks over to him and picks up his wallet. And I was like, oh no. And then immediately he like bends over, tucks it in the guy's front pocket, wakes the guy up just enough to be like, hey, I put your wallet in your pocket. You good? You need anything? You want some water? I was like, these people are amazing. Like, who is this, traveling band of gypsies that are just full of love and just yeah, and it's just I was hooked, man. I was hooked. But Dark Star is what did it. Dark Star, just the tone of Jerry's guitar and TC's in the mix and like that Live Dead Dark Star is just amazing. It's magic. But when I heard the tone of Jerry's, I call it the singing sword. Like I imagine like if you pulled the singing sword out of the rock, it would sound like Jerry's guitar. That's what it would
So
be.
I want to make a couple of comments. Red Setter Farm 5853 said something so beautiful, and I'm gonna put it up again. Played JGB for the delivery of my daughter, Shining Star, for the first time holding her, and
Beautiful.
that's just beautiful. And like I just want to clarify. I know it was a ridiculous thing, and like we don't get to say would you choose weed or Jerry. Like that's just like one of those silly questions, and it's just the thing is
It's fun.
when you
It's a fun conversation.
when you have herb every day, but you don't have Jerry, and we used to get high at the shows, right? But Jerry got us so high, like even without the intoxicants that we used, like
Jerry just
you know.
turned everything to 11.
And
Even
I
on his
want
bad nights, you knew that at some point he could be at his worst, but at some point in the night, you were going to get a moment where it got turned to 11. You were going to get magic. Like that was the thing that was hardest for me when Jerry died because I knew that that was a bottle full of magic that I could go tap into anytime I could get a ticket. I knew that the magic was just literally physically palpable. I could go touch it. I could go swim in it. I could go be part of it anytime I was there. And that was the toughest thing for me.
so I want to continue talking about what Red Setter Farm said.
Hmm.
Um, you know, most people at this point they know the Grateful Dead, and a lot of people don't know about um, Jerry Garcia Band. And we were talking beforehand about how he said I moved out to California for Jerry. I moved out to California for Jerry Garcia Band
Right.
because
That's
you know
church.
yeah, he would play on the East Coast once every other year, and he would play in San Francisco every month that he wasn't playing with the Grateful Dead. And like you said, it was church. I just saw Melvin Seals this weekend, and he brought some of that church with him. But Red Setter Farms reminded me of something. You were talking about Dark Star, and I don't know if it's a he or a she, but they reminded me of Shining Star. And I remember when Jerry broke out Shining Star in 1991 on the East Coast. He did an East Coast Jerry Band tour, and he played Shining Star every night. And every night, he just put more and more of his heart into it. Where at the end, he seemed like he was almost crying. He's like, "You are my shining star." And like the emotion that he put into that, it literally was bringing me to tears every night. And like the Grateful Dead are known for like playing a different show every night, but he played Shining Star every night on that show of that tour, and it was the sweetest shit ever. And my parents, they come from Argentina. They didn't know, like they thought of the Grateful Dead as a cult, okay, and a bad one. And
Hmm.
like they didn't know the love that Jerry had inside of him. And like, like if they could have only heard Jerry singing Shining Star and
Or Russian Lullaby, or
yeah,
just, I was talking to a friend last night about, he was asking me if I'd heard of a band, and I was like, I don't know them. It sounds familiar, but I don't know them. He's like, dude, that's your era. And I was like, yeah. I was like, man, I will say, like, because of my love for the Dead, there's several decades where I didn't listen to a lot of other stuff. But then the other side that I have to give total credit to the Dead and Jerry for is, my twin brother was an amazing musician. He played clawhammer, banjo, taught himself how to play fiddle, everything. And he's had some physical issues and he can't play now. It's real heartbreaking. But you know, he turned me on to all this bluegrass and all this stuff. But so did Jerry. So did the Dead. Like I wouldn't have gotten into bluegrass. I wouldn't have gotten into
me
jazz. I
neither.
wouldn't have gotten into world music. Like the Dead brought all that to me. They taught me all that world of music.
Well, I think we I mean, it was bound to happen on our show because we got two
Yeah.
deadheads that have been just dying to sit back and talk Jerry.
Dead.
But
Yeah.
let's get to the
Yeah,
topic
let's
at
do some
hand.
yeah, let's do some stuff.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pull some of this stuff. I don't know if I took some screenshots. Um, I'm gonna put this up. Alrighty. Hopefully you can see this. This is on Reddit.
All right.
And says cannabis deficiency. And I don't want you to respond to it just yet. They say, noticing a deficiency in my 4-week-old plants. Bottom up. Any thoughts on what it is? Soil Pro Mix white bag, 7.0 EC. That doesn't seem correct. Oh, maybe
Seven.
not pH. pH.
Oh,
EC, CM is zero point 0.8 to 1.2. Feed schedule continuous every day. Jax 15,520. This actually wasn't the best example of what I wanted to say. Okay, how about this? My 20-day-old cannabis plant is starting to yellow on the lower leaves, the first two nodes. The leaves generally seem a bit droopy to me, especially the first pair of leaves. Soil, bloom light mix, pot fabric, 1.32 gallons. Um, Fertilizer, not used yet. This is a 3-week-old plant that has not been fed fertilizer, and someone's wondering why it's unhappy. Um, Set up auto pot. Here's another one. Okay, I'm just reading through some of these. BioBiz soil, BioTabs. Uh, I mean, I guess my the gist of what I'm trying to say here is I'm constantly looking at these posts. Okay, let me see if I can read this one. Yeah, okay. This one says, the plant is 12 inches, or excuse me, 12 inches above the plant. I have a lamp above. After Googling, pretty sure I'm not overwatering. It's in some Espoma organic potting mix and nothing else. And so it's in an organic soil, and they're not feeding the plants. And, you know, I thought we might disagree. I tried to blindside Brandon here and not tell him what we were going to talk about today, because I just figured he's so prepared to debate me. I didn't want to give him time to prepare anymore. And then when I spoke to him this morning, it's like, he kind of agreed with me a little bit on some things. So, like,
Yeah.
you know, I, okay, so I'm often, people know that I love hydroponics and I like growing with mineral salts, right? What they don't know is I love organic gardening. I just think that there's a place for it. And I don't believe the place for it is in a small container in an indoor grow where you want your plants to finish quickly. Okay, cannabis is a very fast crop, finishing, flowering in a couple, 8 weeks, right? So I used to be an organic gardener, and I tell stories that I was such an organic snob that if you tried to give me a pound of herb for free, I would turn it away.
Right.
But I read, and you know who Green Air Products is, since you live up there in Washington? Have you heard of Green Air Products?
It's familiar. I don't know them.
They used to make environmental controllers, like the
Okay.
first CO2 controllers and thermostats, humidistats for hydroponic growing. And they started selling nutrient. And on the back of the nutrient pamphlet, they had this thing that said, organic compounds are mineral compounds that contain carbon, and the carbon must be disassociated. The elements need to be broken down into their more common mineral form before plants can use it. And minerals are the building block of all life on the planet. And when I read that, I was like, shit, maybe I should try this stuff. And I was growing the Chem 91. And when I fed it minerals, all of a sudden the plant was happy. It didn't look like it was one step from death. It looked like it was 2 steps from death, right? And so what I realized is, in thinking that, number one, minerals are the building block of all life on the planet, is, for me, a better solution is give the plants everything that they need in mineral form, and then add some organics. And, like Steve here says, synganics. And that's really what I think is best for indoor growing in a pot. Now, the raised bed thing, we can talk about that. That might be a little bit different. To me, not completely different, but like in a small container. And, what we have is we have beginner growers that they want to learn how to grow their own herb, and they want it to be organic because they think it's cleaner and that they're going to grow a better product that way. And then they don't have the knowledge, and they produce a product that it hasn't met its genetic potential. It's not even close. And so for me, for a beginner particularly, to use mineral salts so that they can guarantee that they're going to get a good outcome, this is what I recommend. And, I get hate from it from people that are, diehard organic growers, but I don't know that they know where I'm coming from because I love organic gardening. I feel organic gardening is meant to be in the ground, okay? And it takes time to nurture a soil and to grow your soil to where it'll feed your plants. And we just don't have the ability to do that indoors in a pot. Now I've rambled for a minute, so I'll let you do the same. What do you think about what I just said, Brandon?
So a lot to unpack there. So I'm not dogmatic, first and foremost. I like to grow weed. I like to grow fireweed, fire ass weed. I want fire.
I
That's what I
already
want. I
won.
want the best herb that I could possibly grow. And I really loved what Tony from Budulero said, like how do when you say that, what do you mean? How do you rank it? Because I agree with him that if weed's pretty, that doesn't mean anything. How does it taste? How does it make me feel? How easy is it to trim? Is it fungally resistant? Like, what is good weed to you in the first place? And that's a whole other conversation. um, Salts versus organics. um, I don't care what people do. I'm not dogmatic. I do want people to be responsible. So if you're outside, I don't want people to over apply nitrogen, specifically phosphorus. That happens a lot outside, and that's impactful to all of us. You've got kids, I've got kids. I'd like for them to be able to drink the water and breathe the air, after we're gone. And so that kind of stuff is important to me. Um, I think that, well, I don't think, I know, because I do it for a living, that I can provide um, full sufficiency and balance to cannabis crops in organic systems. I can also do it with salts. And there are some growers that, we work with that we recommend salts to based on their setup or whatever. Um, the difference, the hope is that with organics, because of some of the SARS, the acquired immune responses, those interactions between the biology and the plant, we're hoping to get a different, maybe enhanced terpene expression. And I love my boss because he's always demanding data, and he's like, yeah, but like we love this and we feel that there's a difference, but where's the data? Um, and so a buddy of mine in Australia has a white paper where it was really interesting, where he showed that the ionic grow actually had a few more points as far as total terpenes compared to somebody did a grow where, scientific method, everything's the same, EC, par, everything in the room's the same. And the salt actually got a few more total points on terpenes. But the interesting thing to me was that it had it had a much smaller window where, like it was only like 3 or 4 notes, where the organics had all the notes, but it might have had a fewer total notes. So it's kind of interesting. But I look at them as delivery systems for fertility, and you're 100% right that the plant is going to uptake an ionic form of that mineral element. It's not going to uptake an organic uh, compound. And so there's an intermediary where there's not in salts. With ionic growing, you're able to deliver that fertility immediately to the plant. There's no middleman wherein, I'm using biology to break things down. And I've just been doing this so long. I've got the SOPs to keep it going, and I can get good harvest metrics and that kind of stuff. Now, with that said, I think that, like my twin brother um, wants to do some growing, and he's an amazing musician, but he couldn't grow mold in a bathtub. Like, it's just not his thing. And so I started him out on JR Peters, on Jack's. It's a super clean product. I got him a pH and EC meter, and that's all you need. and it makes it really easy because it takes fertility out of the question. When you're a brand new grower and you're trying to diagnose a plant and you have no idea where to start, and you're looking at this plant that you love so much and it's looking like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree and you're just heartbroken, you can take fertility out of the equation if you're running a salt and you know that and you know how to do a runoff or a slurry or a pour through, and you can check your EC and your pH and you can compare that to what's going in, and then you can make a really educated guess as to whether you need to correct stream, or if you're good there. And so I think that that is where salt is easier for newer growers. I think that it is harder to manage availability with organics. And so if your irrigation's not just dialed in, if there's certain things that can really throw off your availability in organics that where in salts, it's just there all the time. Um, when you're doing small pots, you can either do organic or salts. If you're going to do organic, you're going to have to do like fish hydrolysate or something like that because your volume of soil is not big enough to hold all the biology and all the inputs that it would take to create the availability that Gabby could do super easily. You know, um, I like to breed, and so sometimes people will be like, "What in the hell are you doing?" Because I'll have 50 plants in a 4x4 and they're all in solo cups or 4-inch pots. And they're like, "How are you doing that?" And I'm like, "Well, it's just fish hydrolysate, or it's J.R. Peters, or it's whatever, match the hatch." That's the first rule of agronomy is the right plant in the right place. So you're not trying to grow bananas in the Arctic Circle. But that also applies to like every decision we make. So if I've inherited a thousand, 6,000, 10,000 1-gallon pots, and that's what I've got to use, that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to deliver fertility in a way that makes sense, both economically and sustainability. I don't want a lot of effluence. I don't want to be part of the problem, but I'm not dogmatic. And so I do think for small pots, and new growers, salts is a great way to go. Um, I love the thing that's most attractive aside from the finished product with me in cannabis, and people arm wrestle about that all day. I love what organics provides for me as far as having a really curious brain, and I like being able to take the reins. And so with organics, and you can do the same thing with salts if you want to learn the chemistry of it. It's not that hard, but I like the fact that I can really easily and really safely, the other side of organics that has an advantage over salts for new growers is that if you get out of pH range or EC range with, a large volume of soil, you've got a nice buffer. Your plant's not going to crash. Now, if you plunge your pH down to 3 or get it up to 8 in a salt grow, your plant's going to tank overnight. It's going to have a real bad night. And so there's advantages to both. And so it really comes
Can I
down to a
respond to
lot of,
that little thing that you said?
yeah,
Okay. And it's
please.
also with other things that you said. So the first thing is with organic gardening, we're looking on Reddit on cannabis cultivation, and someone shows a picture of their deficient plant. Okay. And they're like, what should I do? And, me not having the experience that you have, I just think to myself, oh, bro, you're fucked. Like you want to grow organically. Well, it's too late. Okay. Because everything in organics takes time. So like by the time you see that you have a problem, it's too late.
Well,
Because
so
like
it
with mineral
depends.
salts, you can add something, boom, they take it.
But with salts, you're adding a alarm's going off. It's Dark Star. Of course, it's Dark Star. Um, with mineral salts, you're kind of applying the full buffet of everything. If you grab that J.R. Peters or some other brand or whatever, we're not selling any of this. We're not related to any of this, but I'm just mentioning whatever, some salt. You get the full buffet of everything. With organics, especially if it's a sulfate, if I need calcium, magnesium, or potassium, I can use gypsum, Epsom, and potassium sulfate, and that's almost immediately available to my plant. And I like the fact that I can tweak, because I like to push potassium. I like a, nice, tight, nuggy bud. I like, the drought resistance, the immune response, like all those things that you get from potassium. And so I like to push that a little bit. And I like the fact that I can just go grab that one product and put it in. Um, would that be easy for a brand new grower in a pot? No, that'd be really hard. They would need to lean on fish hydrolysate. And that again would be more of a complete buffet of everything, you know.
Is
And so
fish
it really,
hydrolysate complete?
for the most part, you're not, when I say complete, I'm talking macros. Your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. When I was learning that, macros were NPK, micros were calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, but now that's all macros, and we just say macros and trace instead of macro, micro, and trace. Trace elements are not going to be necessarily sufficient in a fish hydrolysate, but that's fine, especially in an organic setting. Trace are almost never your limiting factor. Um, I see a lot of people kill plants with trace elements, both in salts and organics. The worst farm I ever consulted on was a farm that over applied boron at nitrogen targets, and they lost 10 acres for 8 years. And so over chasing trace, like we can chase trace, and I like to do that, but only after your macros are just pinged, after your environment is pinged. Everything in your room is perfect, you know, your dog's being nice to you, everything in your life is good, then we'll get on the trace elements. But that's a slippery slope. It's dangerous. And so, especially in the salt world, we've got it because of the high pH and big buffer in organics, you can push trace quite a bit further. Um, where, salt, if you did a control with salt, you'd probably kill those plants.
Right, but when we're using a commercial fertilizer, if we're not like trying to mix our own, they generally have those trace elements in trace amounts where it's very difficult to over fertilize with them, because they are putting them in such small amounts.
Small.
I've never seen a hydroponic grower to over fertilize with trace elements. Maybe I
No,
wasn't identifying the problem, but it's
only
just
people that are applying it on top of, you know, because I know that there's certain forum threads and stuff that tell people to add trace with every watering, and I'll see their soil reports, and I'm like, okay, well that's why they're dead, this is 100 times what it should be, so I just, I don't think you should be adding additional trace on top of, in organics on top of what your your agronomist is recommending, and then with salts, it should be in the solution already.
okay. I want to give, and I'm going to call it a shout out, but I'm sure he's not listening and probably never will. But I had an organic um, garden. I took an organic gardening class in college. I was a horticulture student, never graduated, but I would take classes that interested me, instead of the ones that I needed to take to get a degree. And one of them was organic gardening, and my teacher's name was Bob Kennard. Have you ever heard of him, Brandon?
Yes. Yep. And that's an
Yeah,
easy one to remember. I took 7 years of French, and that's French for duck. So that's like the first time I heard that name, I was like, oh, okay, Bob Duck.
yeah.
Sorry.
And no, it's all good. I hope everyone else can remember Bob Duck, aka Bob Kennard. And when you're done watching this video, if you're interested in organic gardening, um, watch some of the videos that he has. But he was so inspiring. First of all, his class took place on his farm. So it was at the Santa Rosa Junior College, and he somehow convinced the staff at the college that he could teach, but he would only do it at his farm. You know, he wasn't going to teach in a classroom. And when you went to his farm, it was literally like going to the Garden of Eden. You can pick any fruit off of the tree, and he had millions of different fruit trees, and any vegetable, you know, or herb off the ground, and it was all perfect. And the things that he said was that it was the minerals. He would always be focused, even though he was my organic teacher, he'd say, yeah, you know, like people are putting too much compost and organic matter in their beds and in their holes where they planted. And like he would have us bring in um, a fruit or a vegetable from our garden, and he could always tell us how it was grown. And the number one thing he would say is, oh, that was grown in compost. Because that's what we all did. We all dug a hole, filled it up with some compost, and what he would say was that the plant was really, you know, big, juicy, but juicy was watery with no flavor. And
Right.
because it was lacking the mineral content. And so he was big on spreading volcanic rock, like rock flour everywhere. And he would
Trace.
only use a small amount of compost. Like he would tell us the amount of compost that we put, you know, in a couple holes in our garden, that's how much he would spread over acreage, because all he was trying to do there was add biology. He wasn't trying to add all this nitrogen. And the way that he added nitrogen was with plants. And the most impactful thing that he ever said to me that I always remember is he said, you want to grow two plants for nature for every plant that you grow for yourself. That way, you're constantly improving the soil instead of depleting it. And you know, when you use this method, the first year the plants aren't doing so good, maybe, right? Next year they do a little better. You get some fruit. You know, it's not the, but the next year the quality is getting better, and then the next year, and then before you know it, you're living in the Garden of Eden like he was, because it's not complicated. It just
Right.
takes time.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Well,
that time is the reason why I object to solely organic gardens indoors, because I just don't feel like we have that time, you
well,
know.
see, that's like,
And
but I would
and,
say like
you
proof is in the pudding that like that's literally what I do.
mhm.
You know, it's literally so I know it works because I do it, rinse and repeat, round after round, and I do it for facilities and I do it, you know. So like there's you just have to know the ways to get the cycling going. So that's what I'm saying is they're both delivery methods, and the way I look at them is like, you know, like you you know, and I know a lot of my friends are vegetarians, and like I'm not saying people should go hunting. This is just an analogy. Um, you can go deer hunting, and you could go to a store and buy a rifle and buy a scope and buy some ammo, and you could go sit in the woods and scope this animal from 200 yards away and shoot it, and you get a deer. You've harvested a deer. Or you could go scout and cut down a piece of wood. You could cure that wood for the next season. Then you could build a bow out of it. You could learn how to stalk and track an animal and get close enough to it, and then harvest a deer. In both cases, you're going to get a deer, you know. So salts and organics, you're going to get a deer. It's some people like the process of building the bow. Some people just really want the deer and more focused on that. And that's kind of where I see like people picking a lane. Some people pick a lane, you know, like you mentioned compost. I think Elaine Ingham should be on her money somewhere. But I do think there's a lot of soil food web stuff that doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny. Compost is one of them. And I like what you just said because I lean on compost for biology, not for fertility. And, you know, I think that like the Coots mix, and that's what a lot of the soil food web folks were doing is the one third, one third, one third, your cocoa peat and your aggregate and your compost. And one third compost is a slow draining, mucky, it's a horrible mix, in my opinion. I wouldn't want to grow in it, you know? And so, compost I see get way over applied. And then it comes down to the quality of the compost, So I see a lot of folks with, they're like, oh, I got the most beautiful compost. And I'm like, okay, well, it's pretty, but is it going to work? What's your carbon to nitrogen ratio? Is it over 16 to 1, 18 to 1? Is it going to, I see a lot of people that get into hugelkultur. And I'm sure everybody here knows what it is, but you're basically filling a bed with wood and growing in that. And so the first year they fail and they're like, I did everything right. I don't understand. And it's because the biology, the bacteria in the soil demands that 16, 18 to 1 ratio. And so it's going to use nitrogen as its energy source to break that carbon down until it's happy. And until then, I don't care what you say, it's not giving up that nitrogen. And so your plants just start crashing. And so it's not the methodology, I think, that fails people. It's lack of understanding how to utilize the methodology. And so you can grow great organic plants, you can grow great salt plants. You just need to know, because there's a lot of organic people that would, you know, because we're shooting for this much higher 6.8 to 7.0 pH. Part of that's a big elephant in the room, heavy metals, people getting tested in tight states for facilities versus home growers don't really have to worry about that. It's still going to be way safer than anything in the grocery store. But organic doesn't mean safe. There's heavy metals in organics. You can go get a bag of J.R. Peters with almost no heavy metals at all, you know, and
Would
or
you
you
would
could
you
get some,
agree?
some
Would you
compost.
agree? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Would you agree that just because it's organic doesn't make it better?
No, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Organic doesn't mean safe. It doesn't mean, like salt. There's two ways to look at salt. There's the colloquial way, same way we use strain instead of cultivar. Like salt mean in our circles, it means an ionic grow. It means, but a salt is just a neutral, it's a base and an acid, and just as far as chemistry, so it's all salt. you know at the end of the day, like you mentioned earlier, it's going to be an ionic form that goes into the plant. um I prefer to grow organically, and
Well, you know what, Brandon?
but it's
I
a preference.
I would too, and I want to take. I mean, I was about to tell you I want you to teach me how to do it, and then I took a breath for a second. And the reason why is because I'm not in a position where I have two different areas. Like I don't have like a whole other area where I could do it, and I don't want to do it in the same room because I feel like that's difficult and creates some problems. But
There's
one thing I wanted to say is, you know, many years ago I owned a hydro shop, and I can mention it by name now because it's been out of business for so many years that this isn't a commercial thing. But it's a garden spout in Willits in Laytonville, and you know, I remember people thinking that their herb was better than salt grown when they were growing in ocean forest soil and just giving it water. And those plants were starving and deficient, like many of these plants I see on uh, cannabis cultivation on Reddit. And so let's say we're talking about both clean, right? And we're not even going to talk about like heavy metals and stuff like that. If you do not give your plant everything it needs in the amounts that it needs, it will not reach its genetic potential. And so, if number one, you're in touch with plants, and number two, you have, the knowledge that you have, Brandon, then, because I never tell people you can't pull it off. I'm not going to tell people that you can't grow organic indoors in a small pot. To me, I just find that it's quite difficult. And But I do want you to teach me how to do it. Either way, I want to figure out how to do it. Um,
I'd,
but
I'd be throw one 30-gallon pot in that room and we'll do it. We'll
yeah,
do it.
that's a tough ask, but I'll try to figure it out. But
There's
the other
some
thing
big
is,
changes.
remember we started the conversation by saying, "Hey, what if you had to choose between seeing Jerry Garcia and smoking weed?"
Right, right.
And we're like, we don't get to choose, right? But with this, we actually get to choose. We can do them both, right? Like, why would we choose organics or inorganics when we can do synganics? I don't even like that term, synganic, but that's,
Well,
because I don't see it as synthetic. I see it as minerals, right? But so
back
we
to
don't
the,
we
back
don't
to
have to choose. Use them both.
Yeah, so back to the soil food web, one of the things that I feel like doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny is that any bit of ionic or salt added to your organic grow is going to wipe out your biology. And we just know from direct microscopy that it doesn't. Um, I'm I don't really worry about managing biology beyond a few basic things. Um, Biology is going to show up. Biology is going to be there. I don't think that, you know, making all the, unless you want to, but making all these organic potions and stuff, I don't think that's the right way to go. I like to take more of a traditional agricultural approach, like I would for, because I'll advise
Because
soybean.
you're an agronomist
And,
and you believe in science, not bro science, right?
right. Well, I know that I can get predictable results with science. I have math that tells me if my target's here, that's a great. I want to say this about targets. Cannabis has such an incredible wide range of morphologies and therefore appetites, and there's there's something to be said for, you have to take some time to learn your cultivars. You've got to learn what your cultivar, this one might eat like crazy, this one might hate that, and certain plants do have, certain cultivars do have a hunger for certain individual elements. Now, in general, you can grow them inside these guardrails really well. It's an amazingly resilient plant. Some of the numbers that I see on soil tests, and I look at the plants, and I'm like, they should be dead. If this was salt, they'd all be dead. And so, again, we can get away with stuff with that buffer. So, on the one hand, it could make things safer for people starting off, but I do think it's easier for people to kind of rule out fertility as an issue with, especially in small pots. In small pots, I see so many people try organics in a 1 gallon and they're like, it's horrible. I'm trying to do water only. And I'm like, well, it's not going to work. You're setting yourself up for failure. And so
Yeah.
it's just delivery systems. You just need to know the ins and outs, and there's ways to do both really well. Synganics, for lack of a better, we'll come up with a better term, Gabby. We'll come up, we'll,
Me and
we'll,
you
we'll come up
together.
with stuff. But for lack of a better term, like that's how they do the giant pumpkins. Now nobody's eating that pumpkin, so they don't care what it tastes like. They don't, but they get the best growth by a combination of available mineral fertility and a diverse population of microbes. And for us as cannabis growers, I see a lot of people that, are really concerned about fungal dominance and teas and in their soil and that kind of stuff. And again, that comes from secession and that's a soil food web thing. And I'm not into biomimicry. I'm not trying to grow like Mother Nature. One, I'm not smart enough to grow like Mother Nature. She knows a lot of stuff that I don't. Two, I don't want rainy days. I don't want high wind days. I don't want freaks cold snaps. I want the same 1200 par, 1200 CO2. I want to be able to set the room optimally, so I'm not into biomimicry. And so I do treat, I grow with, and I've been accused of being like a fake organic grower because I don't, I don't take the lint from my shoes and make KNF ferments out of it, and that's how I feed my plants. I use some kind of, traditional agronomy inputs, but it's all, you can't get an OMRI certification, but everything I use is OMRI certified. Um, and it's just about, you have to be, like you were saying earlier, and I think that it's like one of the key things, you have to be able to be responsive to a plant. Plants grow by the inch and die by the yard. And so you don't have weeks for fertility to break down. So you have to know some cheat codes to be able to deliver your plant. So I take a process or an approach where I preload a lot of fertility. But cannabis doesn't mind that. There's other crops that you would absolutely fry with some of these targets that we do go in.
What about giving the plant too much nitrogen, like, like
Right
where
out the gate.
with minerals you can, flush and then start feeding, with a bloom formula. But if you're preloading, how do you know that your nitrogen is dropping when you want it to?
Right. And that would come with experience or testing. You can continue to test, you can do tissue tests, you can do soil tests, but I'm trying to control expenditures for growers because I'm a deadhead. I'm not trying to get in people's pockets, man. We're about trading and sharing. And so I'm trying to support growers. I work for a company, so I have to charge something for some of the stuff we do, but I try to reduce, I don't want you as an organic grower to be testing all your beds all the time. We want to, we want to look at your removal rates and, after a couple of rounds, I'm usually able to say, okay, well, we either need to bump your target up or down, and here's why. Here's why your removal rates are low. You don't have enough light or enough CO2 or enough, whatever. And so there's like a checklist of, mentally that I kind of go through as far as the things that, I want to focus on in somebody's room. Um, but I don't want them testing all the time. So they would have to, do a couple of rounds, and then we know where we can kind of predict where these levels are going to be. There's certain people, if you're really low, if you finish a round just out of gas and you're starting up your next round, if you put that full round in, you could potentially fry some bare rooted clones. You could get some like really long internodes that we don't want. You could get, people get excited when you overload nitrogen because they get these giant, lush plants that come roaring out of the gate. But those are the plants that crash. Those are the plants that are, susceptible to pests and pathogens. And so, and unless you've got the 12-foot ceilings, that you may run out of space. And so that's not what we want. So a lot of times I'll have people break that nitrogen application. So I kind of deal with each individual, like phosphorus. I'll shove tons of phosphorus into your soil because it's got really strong triple bonds. It takes a ton of energy to separate those. Plants don't have strong enough exudates to do that. And so it's just going to sit there in the soil as a slow trickle. So I'm not going to overload you with that. Nitrogen, I could very well overload you with that. There's certain things, well, I shouldn't even say it. There's certain things it's like you could put way too much in and it's not going to come back and bite you, but I don't even like to list them because somebody will do it and they'll take it so far that it
Well, that
hurts.
that was exactly what Bob Kennard taught us over and over again, was that we were using too much nitrogen in our organic crops. Every
Yeah.
single one of the tomatoes that we brought in, he would say too much nitrogen. He's like, it's really watery and there's no
Water,
there's no
flavor.
flavor. Like you think you want a juicy tomato, but you want it
Not
to
water.
have
Now let
not
me say
water.
this. So let me say this. This is a big distinction. Um, when we're talking like we can't always compare one crop to the other because with cannabis, I don't care about bricks at all. And I'm sure I'm gonna take some fire for that. But the level of sugar levels in cannabis don't really matter to me where it does with the tomato. And so like I do sap testing, which is, tissue along with
Someone
tissue
asked
testing.
about it.
Um, but I would lean on tissue because that's what's actually in the physical plant. That's what's composed into the plant instead of the bloodstream. Like if you do a
And so the tissue
toxicology,
testing is when they burn down the leaves, correct?
yes, yep,
Yeah.
yep. But so I like testing. I'm so grateful. Like you've been growing forever. I've been growing forever, and what would you have done 30, 40 years ago if you could test your plants, if you could test your soil, if you could test like you test
I, I
everything. Oh my
I tell
God.
people this all the time, and
Just
you
the
know,
fact we can talk about it. We can talk. I was so terrified somebody'd find a notebook and I'd get 30 years. We can talk about it. It's crazy. Test stuff.
um, I tell people this all the time, and it's really awesome to hear it from like an organic gardener because, you know, the testing, like you said, back in the day we didn't have it, and we would, look at a book, and the book would show us what a nitrogen deficiency, a phosphorus deficiency, or a potassium deficiency, but it would show us those photos and those books show you what a strain looks like with zero nitrogen or zero calcium, okay? And it's not a compound of deficiencies or too much, right? So, for instance, if you're short on multiple elements, it's going to look very different than if you're just short of one. So the testing is the most valuable tool. I mean, for an organic gardener, it's even more critical than for someone using salts, because when you're using salts, a lot of the testing has been done by the people making the fertilizer to make it complete, right? But with organic, you're just hoping, right? And
Right.
so the testing, that's key. And I wish we were allowed to tell people where to go for testing. Um, but we don't, and it's not even our services, right? We don't, so, but the bottom line is look into getting testing, because that's so valuable to know. And so to broaden on this, the way it works, I got a kid screaming upstairs, might have to go check in a minute and I'll let you talk. But the way
Right.
it works is you don't just do one test, right? You want to test week 1, week 2, and I mean from veg all the way through the transition into bloom, okay? And you can stop maybe, halfway into bloom or a little further, because at that point you can't adjust. It's too late, right? Even with hydro, if you've let things go that far, it's too late to adjust. But so like you can see trends on how you're building up calcium in the leaves, you know. Um, Hold on one second, all right? I'm gonna let you take over.
So Gabby was talking about testing, and I'm seeing comments over here about testing. Things I would say about testing. Um, Test the same time, day and week, every round so that you can compare your results over time. Otherwise, the data is just not as useful. Um, Almost all labs are good labs, but you want to pick one lab and stick to it. And the reason you want to do that is because all these labs, like if you compare A&L to Logan, or just to throw out some different lab names, you'll get wildly different numbers. And the reason is because they all use different extraction solutions. And so they'll have different pHs and different methodologies. Um, so the numbers will be consistent at that one lab, but they'll vary from lab to lab. So once you pick a lab, you want to stay with that one. And again, just same day and week every round so that you can compare your data over time. And yeah, I see Kevin's comment. Bricks is thrown around too much. High bricks does not mean pest resistant. And in fact, what do bugs want? Aphids suck. You know, pun fully intended. They want sugar. And so if I am, and there's plenty of data that shows this, if I'm an aphid and you put me in a room with two plants, one low bricks and one high bricks, I'm going to go jump on that plant that's got that, I'm just, it's maple syrup straight to the face. I want that sugar. And so high bricks does usually relate to a healthy plant, but that doesn't mean it's pest or pathogen resistant.
So we're gonna keep going, but you guys can start throwing some questions in the chat. Um, yeah, I think surprisingly, we agree more than
It's science.
that. Right, it's science. But one thing I wanted to say, since you mentioned science, I wanted to respond to something you said about. Okay, so there's one thing about science: we do not know everything, right?
No, not
That's
even,
why
we're not even started.
that's why we continue to study stuff, right? And so what I always said about synganics is, with synganics, you give your plant everything it needs, and then you're also giving it stuff that it appreciates. And that's why you get a higher quality product. That's why you get more terpene and resin production out of it, because of what we don't know. And a
Right.
good example of what we don't know is, 25 years ago, people weren't talking about silica being beneficial.
Right.
Okay. Silica is not an essential element. Okay. Plants will grow without it, because so that list of essential elements, like everything that's in your hydroponic fertilizer, those are what plants cannot survive without.
Yep.
Okay. But it's about all the things that we don't know that benefit plants. And so, I used to, and I don't really, much anymore. I should do more of it, but I used to make compost tea. Okay. And the thing about compost tea for me, and it's the bro science part, or the magic part, or you mentioned the potion, but it's about like what we don't know that could possibly benefit the plant. And I found that it certainly doesn't hurt, right? No one's ever
Right.
been like, I hurt. Now, if you make an improper compost tea, maybe, right? But with a
Anaerobes.
proper compost, with a proper compost tea, you know, probably not going to hurt your plants with that. It can only help it. And so, I believe in science, but I also believe there's a lot that I don't know. And so when you throw the organics in there, you're allowing for a little bit of that magic, bro science, you know, stuff
And,
that
and even things
aren't
that
able
we
to
do
prove that.
know, we don't necessarily know how it happens. Like there's certain things we know them, but we don't know how it happens. Like diffusion is still a theory. It's like we 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 operate as though we know some stuff, but like we don't know. And there's so much mystery going on, and there's so much complexity in these soil relationships that, I don't, with 40 years in, I just know enough to know that I don't know anything. And so I do try to um, manage my fertility with a science data driven approach. I try to manage targets. I try to, I had a facility in South Carolina, and I would do 20, 40,000 cuts at a time, to provide to HBCUs throughout the Southeast. And that required a lot of irrigation and a lot of fertility. And, I was really concerned about the effluents, and kind of blown away when I reached out to the state and said, do you want to come check my runoff? Do you want to? And they're like, yeah, it's all good. Do what you like, But for me, I care about that stuff. I care about not impacting, I love people that know me well. There's no Jerry to go see, and so I spend most of my free time out in the woods. I live in paradise. I live in an island out in the ocean that's, you know, in the Pacific Northwest, where I've got great hiking and ocean views, and I can see, you know, Mount Baker, you know, the three peaks. It's like it's pretty amazing. I'm very blessed to live where I live. So I spend most of my time out in nature, hiking, camping, doing that kind of stuff. And so I'm very, you know, I volunteer at the state park and do agronomy over there, take care of plants and fertility and water and that kind of stuff, and teach classes. And so I take my custodial, if you've got the tools, that's the burden of knowledge. If you know something, you have the responsibility to do something. And so I take my custodial responsibilities to heart. And I think that if I can grow something green, if I can clean something up, I'm all about it.
Yeah, so I might have offended at genetic monkey saying organic is bro science, but I didn't mean it like that. What I meant about it was the part that we don't know yet, right? Like that there's so much that we don't know, and that's why I like to add organics and compost teas because I know we're giving with minerals. I know we're giving the plant everything it needs, but it's all the stuff that we don't know about that the plant appreciates. And that's why I was making that comment about bro science. I wasn't actually thinking that organic gardening hasn't been studied. It, obviously has, probably way before the 1930s.
And
So,
that was your first approach. You started off as an organic grower, you know.
yeah.
So, you know, you've
And I
taken the
still
class.
love organic gardening. I feel like I constantly have to defend myself of like not being the like chem guy or the hydro guy. It's just, if you're gonna grow indoors. So, currently I'm looking at my backyard and it's all pavers. I don't have any earth in my backyard, but hopefully someday, I'll be living in more of a paradise where, I do have a place where I can improve the soil. And I'm going to do exactly what Bob Kennard taught me. I'm going to grow two
See,
plants for the earth, for every plant that I grow for myself. And I'm not going to try to rush it by dumping a whole bunch of compost in there that first year. And I'm going to watch my soil grow year after year till I have my own little garden of the Eden. That's what I want. I love organic gardening. And like those guys, Budulero,
yeah,
and I believe they grow exclusively organic, but they're in the ground. I love growing in the ground. Like
I
for
love
me,
growing outside,
yeah,
under the sun,
yeah,
out in the. I love to be outside. That was one of the worst things about corporate cannabis for me, is just being under lights all day. I just on concrete. I want to be outside. I'd rather fight bugs. And just let me outside. I'll fight the bugs. I'll fight the pathogens, but just let me outside.
yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things. Number one, on a business perspective, the outside is pretty rough right now. If you're growing for
Oh,
yourself, it's
brutal,
completely different. But
brutal.
being a sun-grown gardener, it's like the the respect is not there. And again, talking about um, Budulero, and I'm going to mark this clip. Um, they, I love those guys because they're not trying to do what everyone else is doing.
100%.
They're like, we're gonna grow these long flowering sativas in these greenhouses, and they're creating a market because number one, no one else is doing it, and then the product is so high quality. So
Yeah.
they're able to get significantly higher prices for their herb than anyone else, like for sun grown, because they're doing something different, and
Well,
big shout
I
out
love
to, and I hope this
yeah.
isn't breaking uh, terms of service on Reddit or
Yeah,
anything
we're
because
not
it's not
selling
my
anything.
brand.
This
It's
is
just,
a shout out. This
yeah,
is just a shout
yeah.
out.
It's like it's a shout out because those guys are really fucking cool.
Mad respect to those guys. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I told you the other day I was talking to a buddy of mine, Adam. from Santa Cruz, and I was like, oh man, like, I would love to grow some of their stuff, and he was like, oh, you have. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I had gotten seeds from him like 10 years ago that was using Dave's sour as the cross, So I just thought that just made me feel so good in the heart, just like what a small world. And yeah, funny stuff, man. But I love what Tony said about he just doesn't judge weed by how it looks. He judges it by how it makes him feel, how it tastes, and they take the extra time to grow. Can't, like my nieces and nephews and, everybody, like all my friends' kids, like they're all in their 20s and they like what a lot of the market likes, which is high THC, preferably purple, preferably triked out, nuggy, um, Skittles, gelato, wedding cake, like candy flavors. And they love to show that stuff to me, and I'm like, okay, well, here's some here's some 16 weeker from your uncle. Buckle up, sweetheart, and like they're like, oh my God, I didn't know weed was did you just dose me? Like what happened? And so I think that there's like a whole generation out there of people that like when they start meeting these longer flowering plants and get a more complex experience out of it, I think they'll be like, oh wow, maybe that is worth an extra 4 weeks. Maybe that is,
Or
um,
8.
or 8. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What are those 20 weeks for the pearls?
Yeah,
Like,
crazy stuff. One thing I said on that show, and I want to say again, is when people say that like that weed is ugly or it's not beautiful like modern weed, I think that's just lack of being able to see beauty. And when I look at those pearls, I think they're amazing. Just
yeah,
because it's not a giant chunk, it's still amazingly beautiful. And like I don't think weed has to be. I mean, look, I like shiny things too, but
right.
I don't think weed
You,
has to be triked out to be beautiful. Like you look at pictures of like some of those old, outdoor strains that weren't triked out that had like really red hairs. I I still think that's beautiful. And I like to say this. I said this many times before. I think all women or all people can be beautiful. Okay. And
yeah,
it doesn't matter if
everybody.
you're black, white, or Asian. Like, I think everyone can be beautiful, like all these races. And so, like, when we talk about terpenes, for instance, is a more easy thing to describe. Like, people will be like, I hate Jack terps, or I hate citrus terps. And it's like, well, you just can't appreciate those women. That sucks for you because they're beautiful, you
And I kind of
know?
feel like
And
that's like we're so privileged that, like because roll it back to 1984 and man, if you had Jack in 1984, if you had something like that you could bring to the show or the party or, like you'd have blown everybody's mind.
well,
Now, that might
what's
not
sad
be
is I don't have it now.
right.
That's
Right.
what's
And
sad
I'll
is that
say
I
like I am one of those people that doesn't prefer Jack. Like I don't. But I know that I'm spoiled rotten and that I can even have that opinion,
but
because I have stuff I like.
you didn't say you hate it, right? You just said you don't
No,
prefer it.
I don't hate
Like
any weed,
I
you know?
prefer I prefer Chem 91 to
Right,
everything,
right.
right? I prefer OGs to everything. And
Yeah.
if I got to like fill my cabinets with whatever I wanted, it would be, you know, 75% OGs, right? But the other 25 would be as wide variety that I could possibly get. And,
Can we talk
like, go ahead. We can talk anything.
can we talk about that OG that I mentioned to you one time, that I used to get from surfing circles that I'm
Sure.
pretty sure was coming from Florida? And I used to get this herb, and it was like neon, like highlighter yellow, and they were girdling these plants, and so they would turn like neon yellow. And like you said something earlier, I loved it. You were talking about like when you see these pictures, you see these deficiencies. I can remember back in the day, like, looking at a cannabis culture or looking at high times or sensimilla tips, and there'd be this plant that would be like this crazy color. And now I know those are deficiencies. Now I know that that was a that was a oops moment. But like I can remember like looking at some of like Soma's catalog and being like, oh my God, how do you get these colors? And I'm like, oh, okay, starve that sucker, so like what's pretty, like you were saying earlier, if you don't give the plant everything, the plant has a biological mission. As much as this plant has fed my children, this plant, like I was a tattoo artist for 20 years. Tattooing's not something you can do part-time. So like I had to be able to pay my bills while I did this other thing full time. Cannabis gave me other careers, other experiences. It's done everything for me. I've ruptured L3, 4, and 5, broken most of the bones in my body. I work out 6, 7 days a week because cannabis lets me. It's my social lubricant. It's my joint lubricant. It fixes my back. It helps with migraines. It's done everything for me. I love it. But I don't think that cannabis gets up in the morning and goes, you know what? We're going to make some cannabinoids and some terpenes that Brandon loves. The plant has its own biological mission, and that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to complete. It wants to reproduce itself and make seeds. And so when we get to senescence, the plant, like whether you're doing salt or organic, you can use controlled stress. We've talked a lot about like biological relationships and with organics and in the plant, but there's also both with salt and organics. You can use control, dry backs and that kind of stuff to do controlled stress to up terpene contents. You can, moderate your environment, change temperatures, relative humidities, all that kind of stuff to, preserve and enhance terpenes. There's all kinds of stuff to do. Um, but at the end of the day, what you like to do, and I say this when I do Tuesday lives, and I always try to get the thing out is like, if you can afford it, because like back in the day, 6, 8K a pound, you could feed your plant gold and still crush it, and still live high on the hog. Those days are long gone, and we all have been forced to like treat this as farmers. We have to make hard economical choices about how many, what we can afford, what we can maintain, and you know, you you have to be able, some of these things that like people do these super elaborate grows and they've got every bell and whistle and it's every, I'm a guy that lives and dies by math, I'm mathletic and I live and die and I feed my family with the science. But some of the bells and whistles I see people putting into facilities and stuff, I'm like, like, can you afford that? Like with the, it just, so there's you got to get a return on your science, and so like where I don't want people testing all the time. I don't want people spending money where it's not necessary, and so I think that whether you're doing salts or organics or whatever, you start at a certain level and you take that Kaizen approach. This is Japanese, it's kind of the Japanese Toyota model of efficiency. There's not like you're not moving the needle super fast, but there's constant incremental improvement. And that's your focus. You start at a base level, and we all have everybody here, everybody in this chat. Like, can you imagine the base level of knowledge of everybody in this chat? Like, holy crap! Like that would be amazing if you could just download that somehow. But we've all got our individual level of knowledge and comfort of how we read the plant. You know, I did a dichotomous key that breaks down whether you're a salt grower or an organic grower. Like, how do you read a plant? How do you read a room? You walk into a room, and I always tell people, like, when you walk into the room, don't go grab a hose. Don't start watering. Don't start checking pH. Don't start. Just stop for a minute. Like you were saying, like how we abuse the plant. Like we do that in the cultivation side too. We're so lucky that we can walk into a room full of plants. You know, and not be terrified, and you know, um,
It's
but we
funny that
treat
you
it.
say that. Um, Remember when I said about choosing between Jerry and herb, and I said
You could grow.
smoke that I could grow. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm gonna grow herb until the day I die because there's just so many benefits to it. Like, and
It's
I
in the
love
front
it.
of all this.
And I feel you're like when you walk into a room. When I walk into a room of cannabis, it's like getting a warm hug from family. Like
It gets me high just to be around them. They
I
they
love
they
it.
resonate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
in the front of
like
every Rosenthal book. Cannabis is not addictive, but growing is. That's in the front of all his books.
or I think they say uh growing weed is a gateway drug, or weed is a gateway drug to gardening.
Right, right. Well, and so
Right?
I grew up in big ag circles, but I didn't fall in love with growing until I fell in love with growing cannabis. That's then I started spreading out. Then I started growing veggies and flowers and other stuff. But it was, I've got a real bad begonia addiction. I love begonias. I was making, I was showing my kids like one of my begonias is flowering last night, and like I just love that stuff. But like without cannabis, I wouldn't have found it, you know, because that's where the passion is, the desire to want to understand.
So I want to say something real quick. We have maybe 10 or 15 minutes before I have to call this. Um, I was expecting to do about an hour, and we're already at an hour and 35 minutes, and my kids are just like upstairs watching TV. You can't
Yeah,
that
yeah.
can't continue. But I'm so grateful for you, Brandon, and
Likewise.
I want to do a lot more of this. I hope everybody in the chat will tell me if you're enjoying Brandon and I doing this together as much as I am, because I mean, this has been an hour and 40 minutes, and I feel like it's been 10 minutes.
We
And
haven't even started to touch any of this stuff.
yeah, and oh, and I feel like I totally failed at what my mission was, which was making a Reddit friendly thing that was like in segments. So like maybe I can edit some stuff together to make like a 15-minute segment for Reddit, but it's just I really don't do short form. It was funny when we
Right.
started, we were already at like 20 minutes before I even mentioned that I want to keep these videos at 15 minutes. And it's like I was completely um I was completely thinking that like we could, let's just answer a couple of questions for 15 minutes, or like talk about and then
Right.
stop, and then, but I was totally kidding myself. And my name is Gabby. I just talk a lot. But we'll try to edit
Yeah.
some content up for Reddit again, Okay, so currently we have 107 or 102 viewers now on YouTube live. And I know that's
That's
just
right.
live. I know we'll have, a few thousand. But when I posted stuff on Reddit, like within a few hours, it had thousands of views. And I'm like, holy cow, like if we post good content, there's people that will watch, and that's what we want, right? Reddit's got no monetization, it's not about like getting paid for these videos. What we want is um, people to watch it, you know? So, but I am grateful for the 105 people that,
Big time. Especially the
that,
day after Turkey Day, hanging out
yeah.
with us. And
So,
I'd love to talk sours. I'd love to talk like, I'd like to talk Grateful Dead stories. I'd love to talk about, like, I consider myself incredibly blessed and lucky. Like, I've had, the Prohibition era, I was pretty wide open. Like I had a 3,000 square foot barn behind my house in town. Like I was getting it, and I've had some really crazy close calls that I think would be entertaining, especially to people that are, kind of like, I've got friends and, family, they've got kids that they've never ever been scared about weed. It never crossed their mind to be scared to drive home with some weed in their car or to smoke weed at a party. It's just they've never been scared, and I love that. That's that's amazing. But I do think that some of the prohibition, like real close calls and just running the gauntlet on tour and stuff like that, you know, some of the
Well,
insane.
you're the first show that I did that we didn't focus on your story. We told a little bit of it. So like we almost can't call this your weed story. It was just like a conversation with Brandon and Gabby. But
Yeah,
we definitely want to hear your weed story. We definitely want to hear stories about, you know, the Grateful Dead and
on the road.
it's funny. I don't know why, but I I was a little surprised by how many people want to hear these Grateful Dead stories. Because like I'm thinking
Yeah.
like I'm this old man and I have the Grateful Dead stories and this and like I'm thinking like the young kids aren't gonna want to watch that and but yeah, like people are just telling us they want Shakedown Street stories and so yeah,
Wow,
we'll have to
wow,
do more of
wow.
that too.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, that was magic. That was magic time. We're both very lucky to people ask me how many shows I saw and I always said a lot but not enough, And 'cause man, like when you asked me that question earlier, to kick it off, what would I do, weed or Jerry? And I never answered it. And
It was a stupid question. It
but
was like,
it's one of those things like there's not many like giving up smoking weed might be one of the only things that I wouldn't do to get Jerry back because there's not much I wouldn't. That was my favorite place to be. No place else I'd rather be, you know.
yeah. Me too. And I want to repeat this again. And I don't remember the person's name, but they wrote that they sang Shining Star when their baby was being
Yeah,
born. And
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm still like super touched by that. And it reminded me of the story that I told you guys about Jerry playing Shining Star every night. Um,
The whole
of
tour.
that fall tour. And Steve asks if we were ever at the same show. It's impossible that we weren't, right? Because we used to
Yeah,
go,
we had to.
like, I mean, if you saw Jerry at the Warfield anytime after 1991, because like we moved out here late 91, I was at
I've
every Jerry show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't see any of those. I was all Midwest, East Coast. We would go up to Canada, when those
So tell
shows
me
and that
some of
kind
the
of
shows
stuff.
that you went to or some of the tours that you went to.
So like my first show was June 22nd of 88. That was Buckeye Lake, and that was like the quite the baptism, man. Like I got dipped and it was amazing. And Buckeye was one of those places like kind of like Deer Creek where it was kind of an East Coast West Coast meeting of the tribes. Like it felt like everybody was there. And it, and like I love all tours. Like this is something I'd like to talk about, like spring, summer, winter tour, like fall tour. Like did you prefer? Because I love, man, there's something about just a salty summer sunburn tour that I just love, man. But I also love, getting packed in elbow to elbow, with way too much clothes on for a winter tour up in New York and Philly and stuff like that. So, you know, yeah, there's so much Grateful Dead to talk about. We'll have to just do
So
a Grateful Dead,
my
just
first
that.
show was also in '88. It was in March of '88 at the Brendan Byrne Arena,
Oh wow.
and um, the next day was my dad's birthday. So it was 3/30/88 was the show I went to, and my dad's birthday was 3/31/88. And I remember like that whole day, I was like, I can't fucking believe I can't go back. Like I couldn't go. Like we had like family plans and stuff, and it's like I was just like so I can't go back. And I got high that night, so I was so yeah. And then
That's
you
how
know,
I felt the first time I ever got dosed, and the first time I ever went to a show. Like the next day, like I wasn't depressed, but I needed to get back to that. I wanted to get back to that. That was so much cooler than anything I'd ever experienced or even imagined you could go do. You could go hang out with all these freaks and be freaky, and everybody was taking care of each other. And yeah, I mean, and the music, like, I've seen thousands of concerts and I've served up everybody from the Marleys to, whatever, but I've seen jazz, reggae, bluegrass, rock. I've seen like, all the big Stones, The Who, like all that kind of stuff, Floyd. But I've seen like all kinds of, just I love music. Music, give me music, man. I love it. I've seen so many shows in so many just thousands of different acts. Nothing hits me like Jerry Garcia's guitar. Nothing. And there's music that I love it. I would take it to a desert island with me. But like if I could pick one thing to listen to for the rest of my life, that would be Jerry's guitar. And and
somebody's
and,
got to
and
bring back that shirt or that sticker that said, "There's nothing like a Grateful Dead concert,"
nothing. Yeah, good
right?
old Bill, Uncle Bobo. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's nothing. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
still
don't mean
go I still go to a lot of music and I still enjoy music, but it's a completely different thing than like going
it's
to a
kind of
Grateful Dead concert.
do you feel like it's kind of more like to a certain extent like and this isn't like the best way to put it but like going to dead shows I almost took it like a job like I took it real seriously and so like I had things to do like when I hit the lot I had things to do but then also like I didn't want to be like if one of my friends was screwing up and like I'm like bro like I'm not getting in late like you need to get it together whatever you got to do but like I'm gonna be inside. And we figured out like at a certain I don't even remember when but like at a certain point somebody hipped us to like there was a section on Jerry's side like the section right behind the floor that apparently was held for like friends, family, whatever, but there was like a bunch of empty seats almost like every show. And this dude, this older head told us, he was like, man, you can if you come in early, you can just go sit there. And we were like, for real? And he was like, yeah. And so we started doing that. And so we would go sit that first set right there on the rail and we'd have like a whole row to boogie down and like. So big ups whoever that brother was. Like that's the thing. There's so many people.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna tell some more of these stories. I appreciate everybody. There's been over 100 people watching us live pretty much the whole time. I appreciate you guys for joining us early on a day after Thanksgiving. I'm confident that Brandon will accept my invitation to do this again regular, to tell
I'd be on.
his weed story, to tell stories about, life following the Grateful Dead, and, just everything. So,
I've enjoyed this so much. I really look forward to it, man. I feel very blessed to know you, man. So appreciate
yeah,
all the
I
generosity and
feel
all the
exactly the
love.
same. And hopefully you'll teach me how to grow organic. One thing I wanted to say is I would grow organic, like, and I would love to. Like, it's not like, man, I love salts and, the companies that mine them and, but it's just like, I just want to do what's working best. Also, as a nursery, like you got to ask yourself, what's better for a nursery, to grow organic or to use minerals? Because what am I trying to do when I'm trying to just grow the biomass and multiply it,
Yeah,
you
you're
know,
not trying to
and
take it
and
too
you,
far.
the salts is the easy way to produce the most growth from these plants consistently. But we'll have this
With the
we'll have this
small
conversation
footprint.
again the next time. I got my kids.
With the smallest footprint, yeah, which is
Yeah,
important.
love to
Hey
you,
man,
brother.
Gabby, thank you so much. Much love. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the faces, Nubs and Sincerio and all the friendly faces here and all the new folks. Um, honored to hang out with you.
Hey, Brandon, one thing, you can't hang up, okay? You have to stay on the
Gotcha.
line because you have
Okay.
some of the file uploading. So I'm gonna stop